everyone, welcome to another Music Talk Tuesday, and today I thought it would be interesting to briefly address some songs that discuss dreams, and in particular the whole kind of concept of dreams, and do so I think in a very interesting and unique way. So without further ado, let me go over all of these songs that I have in the list, and I'll be sure to link within the description all of the songs so that you may enjoy them. Starting off right out of the gate, Dreams by the Cranberries. Yes, I remember this song from, in particular, my childhood. I believe this came out within the 90s. But basically, this song has a very kind of delicate as well as powerful and eerie feel to it. It's interesting because there's certain parts of it where she's kind of speaking softly and very kind of gracefully, and then other times she's just hit with a powerhouse of feels, I guess you could say. And I think that's what really is why the song stands out from an instrumental as well as vocal standpoint, is the fact that it just tries to enhance as well as sort of provide you a sense of kind of relief and escapist kind of attitude towards the whole concept of, in this case, dreams. But basically, within the lyrics, the narrator describes basically falling in love with a person, and that person ultimately represents the dream. Because you're a dream to me, so to speak, which is what she sings throughout the song, the vocalist. And it's very fascinating because when you really add in the lyrics, you really do see how it's associated well with the instrumentals and the way in which the song is paced and its mood, and it really is a interesting way of bringing about the concept of a dream, because you really do feel the sense that she is vulnerable to this particular person, but you see the meaningful connection she has with the one person based upon the way she kind of describes the way the person sort of puts her in this state of being sort of like in a dream, in a fantasy, even though it is reality. So it kind of, it really kind of tries to clash these two things that are sort of supposed to represent the opposite, and at the same time make them sort of coexist together, so to speak, that the actual dream is a representation of reality, and that just blows her mind because usually dreams don't represent forms of reality, and sometimes we oftentimes think of being in love as somewhat like dreams, or puts us in a somewhat dreamlike state. So these two combinations of having her experience be reality and have it reflect onto a very emotional and fantasy oriented state really shows you that rationality as well as fantasy can exist together, because there are moments, I think, within life where people feel this kind of joy and this beauty, and I think a lot of it has to do with the fact that what we dream of actually has some grounds and significance within reality. So I think that's very fascinating, and I think it ultimately works out really well for this song, and I think it's definitely worthy of a recommendation if you are interested. Next one I will be addressing is a rather famous one, especially considering the fact that it has dreams within the title as well. Are made of this by, and I want to make sure that I pronounce this name right, Eurythmics. Eurythmics. Yes, this band from the 80s actually. And I really do admire and sort of appreciate the kind of 80s vibe. And it tries to have this kind of intoxicating, seductive nature to it, as opposed to the previous song where it feels very, there's a certain amount of beauty and almost somewhat innocence to it. Whereas here, it kind of tries to be, you feel like you're in a sort of different environment where it's kind of it's tempting, and basically it's sort of reflected onto a little bit of the lyrics within the song, because you'll see how they say some of them want to use you, some of them want to get used by you. It's sort of trying to address the whole concept of dreams as being something that we kind of desire. It's some kind of fulfillment. Like once we have a certain dream, a certain goal, a vision, our lives become more fulfilled, and or we think that we are able to get ultimately what we want through accomplishing said dream. And I think I almost wanting to say that although this song I think is much more open to interpretation than the previous song, and is a whole lot less specific, I think it's also kind of reflecting onto the idea of how sometimes the temptations of dreams are probably disguised as being, they're kind of a mirage, so to speak. They're not something that can be fully, I guess, maybe encapsulated. And it might just be, I think more specifically, the person is talking about sort of more selfish desires, like those kinds of dreams. And, everybody's just kind of using each other as a means to get whatever dreams are out there. So I think that's kind of what the lyrics sort of express. It's not, I don't think it's really designed to be as positive towards the concept of dreams. And again, it's not, it's, I think, trying to address different kinds of dreams than like the previous song that I mentioned. It's kind of addressing more of the, the sort of egotistical kind of dreams, and ones that kind of, have the ability to kind of both intoxicate us and seduce us, but yet maybe ultimately destroy us. And I think that's really kind of what it's trying to get at. Although I could be wrong, and I'm not saying that that's the definitive definition, but from what I can tell by the way the instrumentals are orchestrated, as well as the vocals and the lyrics, it kind of insinuates that kind of message, at least from what I can tell. But it's definitely worthy of a recommendation, and very interesting, and probably one of the more famous songs of this particular band. Third song that I wanted to mention is called "All I Have to Do Is Dream" by the Everly Brothers. Excuse me. This one is rather interesting because it describes dreams as kind of a state of being. Like it's not a person, it's not a selfish desire, it's sort of a place, and in doing so, and within that place there is the love and desire, so to speak. So basically, you feel sort of the haziness and the dreamlike state the song wants to put you in through these instrumentals. And it also, though, really showcases the underlying sadness fairly well. And I think that's what's actually rather unique about this song. Unlike the previous songs where I feel like there's a little bit more of an emphasis onto one particular thing, whereas here I feel like the combinations really sort of focus in on the focus really deeply on the state of the dream, so to speak. But basically, the narrator is talking about wanting a lover, basically, um, and all he has to do is dream. So it's kind of saying that the love that he has for someone is not a reality, and go to he can only be happy unless he goes into this unless he goes into the dream, unless he escapes reality completely. Um, so I think that's rather interesting. And again, you really do feel the sort of the pain and the sadness and the loneliness that this person has. You really do get the sense that there is this underlying misery to him because he knows that it's something that can't be a reality, because it's all within dreams. But again, the lyrics even in and of themselves kind of display this sort of irony to them, because he says all I have to do is dream, so to speak. But when you're just dreaming, it's not really it's not really making anything happen. So yeah, that's just kind of and it's not reflecting onto everything else that's going on within your life. So I think that's really the the pain that he ultimately feels, and how it's really causing him to kind of just not uh, be in a happy place, but at the same time it sort of tries to fulfill something that isn't there, even though he knows it's not there because it's not a reality. So it's kind of complicated in that respect. But if you just don't think about it too hard, it's fairly easy to grasp. And I think I almost want to say this was either early 60s, later 50s. I would almost want to say it's probably the early 60s that this song came out. But it is definitely one of the ones people seem to remember, and it's definitely uh, has the great tone and vibe of that era, and it's definitely worthy of a recommendation in my humblest opinions. So without further ado, let me address the next song that I wanted to talk about, which is Daydream Believer by the Monkees. Ah, yes, this song. This song's a lot of fun. I've always enjoyed hearing this song, and it was almost hard for me to initially understand the lyrics. Because it sounds like that they could, be different words sometimes. Um, but unlike the previous songs where it's addressing the dream through various standpoints, it's basically talking to someone in and in doing so trying to cheer them up. And basically the person that ultimately is getting cheered up is the daydream believer, really. And this daydream believer is kind of down because the expectations that this person has within their life doesn't amount to what ultimately exists within reality. So the daydream believer, it's someone who wants these higher expectations. And this narrator is kind of saying, all your dream, he's basically telling the daydreamer, that you don't need to have your life to be perfect, and you don't need to have all of these crazy outlandish dreams. You just need to, appreciate sort of the simpler things. And it's important that we sort of have each other, because I think it's supposed to kind of insinuate that the narrator is sort of the boyfriend of the Daydream believer, um, and hence the girl. So the girl is uh, basically her dreams don't end up matching reality, and he's saying he's sort of telling her in a way that that's okay, and that it's that the important thing is that we don't really need all that much, and we don't need to constantly have the urge to dream for more, because the important thing is sort of that we have each other. So that's kind of really the message of the song, and I think it ultimately works. I mean, it's fairly upbeat compared to the previous songs that I mentioned. It really does make you feel like you're in a dream, ironically, even though the narrator is kind of insinuating the idea of, you shouldn't try to overdream things or over expect things out of life, so to speak. You have to kind of realize that not everything's going to go as planned, not everything's going to go as expected. There's going to be bumps and along the way, but it's important to keep the positive attitude, I guess. And it's okay to dream, just understand that sometimes these things don't end up matching up to reality, and but it's okay, because ultimately it's more important to have certain things than really a perfect life, because otherwise we would want more dreams, and we would want more expectations. So I think it's really trying to bring about a lot of these interesting concepts, and I think it really does bring sort of the daydreamer back to reality, but does it in a very pleasant and upbeat way, and sort of ironic, because it sounds very dreamlike and very positive and optimistic, but at the same time it's not. It's trying to get the message across that you gotta lower those expectations a little bit, and it's okay to not have everything that you want out of life, but it's important to have the important things and not these grandiose picture perfect expectations. So yeah, I think that's really ultimately all I can say about that one. Last one I wanted to mention is Dreamer by Supertramp. And the interesting thing, as you can probably see by the title of the song, is that the title is Dreamer. So it's talking about a person, and that person is a dreamer. And basically, the narrator talks about the fact that the dreamer has got too much, he's got his head up in the clouds all the time. He's not the kind of person that goes out and ultimately kind of seeks out those dreams. He just kind of drifts along and then never really sees anything through. So that's kind of what he's almost trying to define the definition of a dreamer as that. And the interesting thing, though, is again, it has this somewhat ironic nature to it, because although he's criticizing the dreamer, he kind of creates this very upbeat, almost somewhat optimistic sounding attitude towards the song, because throughout the vocals as well as the instrumentals, you really do get the sense that the song just feels, it has this go-luckiness to it. It's not like he's saying to the it's not like he's talking really down to the dreamer almost. And I think that's the interesting thing is that it's so energetic, and it's not trying to be kind of mean spirited, you know. So I'm almost wondering if it might have to do with the fact that um, the narrator maybe envies the dreamer in the sense that, you know, he's able to come up with these crazy and really outlandish kind of ideas, uh, but then he sort of, you know, goes back to the fact that the dreamer never sees anything through. Um, but I mean, even though I disagree with the idea that anybody who is called a dreamer is automatically someone who doesn't try to, you know, do something about dreams, I mean, you know, that, I mean, the whole concept of, you know, doing those kinds of things and where all of these innovative ideas came from were largely from people who were dreamers, who did think outside the box, who were a little bit on the kind of unconventional way of thinking side, and they came up with something and it became brilliant and people bought into it. So again, on the one hand, I understand the kind of dreamer the narrator's talking about. I don't agree that this is the pure definition of a dreamer, but sometimes this ultimately ends up happening to a lot of people who do have these kinds of big ideas and who do really classify themselves as dreamers. They unfortunately get lost in all of their ideas, and nothing unfortunately comes to fruition. And that's the unfortunate thing. But at the same time, you know, I think its kind of ironic nature is probably because, on the one hand, there is some good aspects that can come from being a dreamer, but at the same time, the lyrics reflect onto this reality that tells people that, you know, it's not just about the ideas, it's kind of how you ultimately execute those ideas, and you know, who you get to help you with your ideas and all that. So that's really ultimately, though, all I think I can say, though, when it comes to this particular list. Those are all of the songs I wanted to mention. If there are any questions, comments, concerns, I'd be more than happy to answer them. Thank you so much for watching. Excuse me. I hope you all have a pleasant day, week, month, year, and I hope to see you on the next video. Take care. Bye-bye.